Richard Kuklinski, known as the Iceman, was a notorious contract killer responsible for over 200 murders. His life was a paradox of chilling brutality and outward normalcy. To the outside world, he was a loving husband and father in suburban New Jersey. Beneath this facade lurked a cold-hearted killer. His story raises unsettling questions about the nature of evil. To understand the genesis of the Iceman, one must delve into the formative years of Richard Kuklinski. Born in 1935 in Jersey City, New Jersey, Kuklinski's childhood was a brutal crash course in violence and neglect. His father, Stanley Kuklinski, was a violent alcoholic who ruled the household with an iron fist. A brakeman for the railroad, Stanley would frequently vent his frustrations on his family, subjecting them to brutal beatings that left them physically and emotionally scarred. Richard, the second of 4 children, bore the brunt of his father's rage. Beatings were a regular occurrence, often for the slightest perceived infraction. His mother, Anna McDermott, was not a source of comfort either. While not physically abusive like her husband, she was emotionally distant and cold. She worked as a packer at a meat processing plant, and her days were spent in the chilling environment of death and dismemberment. This desensitization to violence, coupled with her inability or unwillingness to protect her children from their father's wrath, created a toxic atmosphere in the Kuklinski household. Young Richard grew up in a world where violence was the norm, where love and affection were replaced with fear and brutality. It was in this crucible of abuse and neglect that the seeds of the Iceman were sown. By his early teens, Richard Kuklinski was already no stranger to violence. He had begun engaging in petty crimes, petty theft, vandalism, acts of random cruelty that seemed to offer him a twisted sense of control in a world where he felt powerless. As he grew older, his crimes escalated in severity. He graduated from petty theft to armed robbery, his brutality becoming increasingly pronounced. He seemed to relish the fear he instilled in his victims, the power he wielded over them. The streets of Jersey City became his hunting ground, each successful crime feeding his growing sense of detachment and lack of remorse. It was during this period that Kuklinski caught the attention of the Gambino crime family, one of the most powerful mafia organizations in the United States. They recognized in him a chilling efficiency, a lack of hesitation that made him the perfect candidate for their line of work. Under their tutelage, Kuklinski's criminal education was further refined. He learned the art of contract killing, the meticulous planning, the cold-blooded execution, the art of making a body disappear. He embraced this new life with a chilling enthusiasm, his reputation as a ruthless and efficient killer spreading throughout the underworld. The Iceman had arrived. Years later, after his capture in 1986, Richard Kuklinski would become the subject of numerous interviews and documentaries. He spoke with a chilling candor about his crimes, his voice devoid of emotion as he recounted the murders he had committed. In these interviews, viewers were offered a glimpse into the mind of a killer, a mind seemingly devoid of empathy or remorse. He spoke of his victims with a chilling detachment, referring to them not as people, but as jobs or contracts. The act of killing for Kuklinski was no different than any other job. It was a way to make a living, a way to support his family. One of the most striking aspects of these interviews was the stark contrast between Kuklinski's demeanor and the horrific nature of his crimes. He would describe acts of unimaginable cruelty with a calmness that bordered on the conversational. He would talk about freezing a victim's body to mask the time of death, or dismembering a body to dispose of it with the same matter-of-factness that one might use to describe a trip to the grocery store. This chilling disconnect, this lack of affect, was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Richard Kuklinski. Section 5. The detached executioner, modus operandi, and lack of remorse. Kuklinski's modus operandi as a hitman was as cold and calculated as his nickname suggests. He was a master of disguise, often altering his appearance to avoid detection. He would case his victims for weeks, learning their routines, identifying their vulnerabilities. He preferred to use untraceable methods such as cyanide poisoning or crossbow bolts to avoid leaving behind any evidence that could link him to the crime. He was meticulous in his planning, always ensuring that he had an alibi and that his tracks were covered. One of the most chilling aspects of Kuklinski's crimes was his complete lack of remorse. He claimed to have killed over 200 people, yet he never expressed any regret or guilt for his actions. He saw his victims as obstacles to be overcome, problems to be solved. They were not people to him, but simply targets. This chilling detachment, this absence of any moral compass, is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Kuklinski's psyche. Section 6. Dr. Park Dietz's perspective, unraveling the psychopathology of a hitman. Dr. Park Dietz, a renowned forensic psychiatrist, had the opportunity to interview Kuklinski extensively. Dr. Dietz's analysis painted a picture of a man with a complex and disturbing psychological profile. He diagnosed Kuklinski with antisocial personality disorder, characterized by a pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others. This diagnosis was supported by Kuklinski's history of violence, his lack of empathy, and his disregard for social norms. However, Dr. Dietz's analysis went beyond simply labeling Kuklinski as a sociopath. He explored the interplay of nature and nurture in shaping Kuklinski's personality. He noted that Kuklinski's upbringing in a violent and abusive household likely played a significant role in his development of antisocial traits. The constant exposure to violence, coupled with the lack of love and affection, likely desensitized him to violence and impaired his ability to form healthy attachments. Section 7. The ripple effect of violence, impact on families and society. The impact of Kuklinski's crimes extended far beyond the immediate victims and their families. His reign of terror left an indelible mark on the communities where he operated, instilling fear and mistrust among those who lived there. The knowledge that someone capable of such cold-blooded violence could exist among them, hiding in plain sight, was a chilling reminder of the dark underbelly of society. For the families of Kuklinski's victims, the pain and suffering were immeasurable. They had to grapple not only with the loss of their loved ones, but also with the horrific circumstances of their deaths. The knowledge that their loved ones had suffered at the hands of such a callous and remorseless individual only compounded their grief and anger. Section 8. Nature versus nurture. The complex interplay in Kuklinski's life. The case of Richard Kuklinski raises profound questions about the nature of evil. Was he born a monster, or was he a product of his environment? The answer, like most things in life, is likely a complex interplay of both nature and nurture. It's impossible to say for certain what role genetics played in shaping Kuklinski's personality, but it's clear that his upbringing played a significant role. The constant exposure to violence, the lack of love and affection, the absence of any positive role models, all of these factors likely contributed to his development of antisocial traits. However, it's important to note that not everyone who experiences a difficult childhood goes on to become a killer. Kuklinski made a series of choices that led him down a path of violence and destruction. He chose to embrace the darkness within him, to use his intelligence and cunning for evil. Section 9. Preventing future Icemen, early intervention, and the importance of mental health. The story of Richard Kuklinski serves as a chilling reminder of the importance of early intervention and the need for greater awareness of mental health issues. If Kuklinski had received help as a child, if someone had intervened in the cycle of abuse that he endured, perhaps his life would have taken a different path. Perhaps the Iceman would have remained dormant, his potential for violence never fully realized. While it's impossible to say for certain what could have been done to prevent Kuklinski from becoming a killer, his case highlights the need for a multifaceted approach to addressing violence and crime. This includes addressing poverty and inequality, providing support for families in need, and improving access to mental health services. By working to create a more just and compassionate society, we can hope to prevent future tragedies like the one perpetrated by Richard Kuklinski.